So I don't exactly know where this is going to go, but I know I need to express this. So over the last, since mid-December, um, I've been slightly manically, really excitedly been working on something that I don't fully understand yet. And I don't want to build too much tension here before actually naming it. But perhaps I can start with sort of the where I came from and where it came from. And essentially it started with a year's worth of conversations that myself and my partner had with ChatGPT. We both use the same ChatGPT account, and we've been self-reflecting and philosophizing and asking like literally whatever, like the kind of stuff that I don't know, like whatever, um, and yeah, okay, yeah, I say whatever, but it's a little bit skewed by the kind of conversations we'd obviously have, which lean, on my end, maybe a bit more into sort of philosophical territory, philosophizing, trying to understand the structure of reality, trying to understand the spiritual field or space in more rigorous language, having come from a science background. And on my partner's end, thinking a bit more about healing and sort of ancestral processes and healing and whatever, right? So, anyways, so what I then did was I downloaded our entire chat history and gave that ginormous document to Notebook LM. And the fantastic thing about Notebook LM is that it's really good at finding patterns in ginormous files, right? Or across lots of files. So if you try to do that with ChatGPT itself, it won't really work because it can't keep all of that in its head. But Notebook LM is particularly good for that. So I thought I was really excited about that idea because I wanted to, kind of in line with what I have been discussing with ChatGPT for a long time anyways, which is trying to understand reality in the broadest terms. I was like, I want to understand my reality, like what are the sort of deeper threads here that go through all, this whole chat history, like what is, yeah, what are the currents here? What are the deeper patterns? And Notebook LM synthesized 6 really interesting points. It called them operators. And these weren't sort of content categories. It's like, oh, you talk about this kind of thing and this kind of thing and this kind of thing. But they were more like, what an operator is, right? An operator is not the input of the function, but the operator is the function. It's like what transforms the experience. So the conversation may have been more about certain experiences, sort of domain level chat, and the operator, 6 of which it named, were more like the meta or the higher level transformations that were happening, right? And they hit me like a ton of bricks because it was like distilled into 6 points, stuff that I've been circling around quite a lot. And yeah, and I was like, there's a there. I didn't quite understand what it was, and essentially there's been a whole evolution from there. But let me try to remember what those 6 initial ones were. So The first one was it named it the mirroring principle, which comes up all the time, right? In the idea of our reality being a kind of mirror to inside from the outside. Emotionally, how our emotional dynamics tend to sort of there's inversions that happen. Like for example, people hurting people, and gosh, I'm not going to do a very good job at naming specific examples here, but it's essentially what comes out of duality, right? Like our the duality in a reality often emerges as mirrored truths, right? Whether that's structurally, or something like an organism, in a sense, is not independent of its environment, but as in a sense of selective pressures, it mirrors its environment perfectly, right? So yeah, that was one. The next one, it was called translation between worlds or between domains or something, which is also something I've been doing or been trying to do, which is, it's like what is the spiritual language in terms of my scientific understanding? What's this emotional language in terms of my symbolic understanding? So there's like reality has all these different layers of interpretation to it, and how do we move between them? Because we tend to be quite focused on the mind, which is semantic, which is largely symbolic, right? It's in language, in symbolic language, and then we try to stuff everything else that seems external to our symbolic center into that symbolic language, and there's a lot of loss there. So yeah, so this translation between domains was the second one. The third one was threshold reorganization, right? It's this principle that kind of wherever you look, you hit a threshold and then things reorganize, right? That can be societal, that can be a spiritual awakening, call it an ego death, that can be water boiling and going through a phase transition, So, yeah. And then the other three were slightly different. They seemed a little bit different. One of them was this principle of, at the time it was just called inside-out sovereignty, right? Which is obviously more personal in stance, in how we engage in change and how we author our lives from the inside out, rather than sort of being responsive from the inside out as opposed to reactive from the outside in. And that principle has a lot to do with how we give our power away, and there's all sorts of different ways in which we do that, right? In all sorts of ways in which we can place ourselves, we can place our energy to be centered as opposed to outsourced. Yeah, so inside out sovereignty was what that operator was called at the time. The next one was something, I forgot what it was called, but now it's essentially, it was called energetic coherence. I'm sure it was called something else. Anyways, and then the last one was paradox tolerance, or the interdependence of paradox. Essentially how there are some tensions in our reality that seem beyond reconciliation, right? And that certain, it has a different, the names sort of evolved as they clarified. It's not really interdependence of paradoxes, but interdependence of truths which form paradoxical realities, right? And later down the line, becoming clear how it's important to not collapse those. Anywho, so that was like the first set, and then I ran just out of curiosity. I was like, is there anything else? Because I wanted to understand. Is there some like what is this? Because it hit me. It resonated so deeply with me. It was like, is this just our chats, or are these operators somehow more universal? What does universal even mean? Can there be other ones? What are they exactly? And of course my science brain immediately was like, if this is fundamental, there must be a structure here. They can't be arbitrary. So at that time I just asked it again, can you do another pass through? Are there any other operators, any other threads, anything else that this first pass didn't catch? And that was really interesting. So now these conversations about healing kind of surfaced a little bit more, but all, of course, not exclusive to that, but what it named were anchoring conditions. What it named were things like irreversibility and embodiment and sort of energetic limitation. Essentially, the conditions that ground or anchor these operators in embodied space-time, if you will. It's what makes these movement through these operators not arbitrary, but like the pacing matters. Things that are done can't be redone. As systems part whole, we have limitations, and those aren't a bad thing, but they're kind of what give movement through these operators meaning and weight in the first place. So that was really interesting because I don't know if I can say it in a better term, but it grounds the operators. And now we get to where it gets really interesting. But I'm gonna pause. I'm gonna pause right here because I don't want. This will be a long ramble. So consider this part one, just a little intro to where we started, and the journey continues, and it's very, very interesting. In my humble opinion, at least, I find it very interesting. It's the reason why I'm doing it. So, stay tuned. Lots of love. We'll see you later. Ciao, ciao.